You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. Hello, everybody. We're back here at Healing Voices Project. Thanks for joining us here. I'm Mike Torville, your host. And as usual, we have our special guest today. Our guest today is Chris Rich from Chris Rich Coaching. And we've had Chris on before, her and her bestie, Amy, who met through the town of Long Meadow and some of the activities there in a program called Close Community. And if you're watching this and you can tune into a previous episode, we aired the special episode with Amy and Chris about the Close Community and the wonderful programs they have through the town of Long Meadow. And again, it was closecommunity.org, I believe, is the website, which is tons of information. So I highly recommend you, watch the episode with Amy and Chris, and also tune into closecommunity.org for some great information there. So welcome back, Chris.
Thank you.
Sure, glad to have you again.
Good to be here.
But this time you're on your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so why'd you come back? All right. So we have lots of other things to talk about, right? About your coaching, and a lot of things that relate to what we've talked about before. And so I think we'll do a little bit of background on you first before we dive into the conversation, because you are a coach. You are a life coach.
Yes.
And your website is chrisrichcoaching.com.
Correct.
And so we'll talk about the difference between coaching and therapy, and the clear difference between those things. What motivated you to do this, to get into coaching. Mm-hmm. And I think what the bottom line is, I guess, from our previous conversation, is your children, who really got you into a lot of your children and your marriage, right? Yeah. And got you into the coaching and all that developed, and your work at Close Community, and all kinds of related things. So anyway, thanks again for coming.
You're welcome.
Sure.
Well, okay, so I think that, if I remember correctly, your first question, the difference between a coach and a therapist. Mm-hmm. A therapist has extensive training to diagnose mental illness, to handle trauma and crisis. So if I was dealing with any of those or a significant life event, I would seek the help of a therapist. Mm-hmm. And I would know that I would need a therapist because I would feel like I'm not functioning at my base level. We all kind of know what's normal for us. So I would contact a therapist if I just felt like I was just really struggling and not able to live my life the way that I normally would. And
cope with things that are challenges that you're facing.
Yeah. And we all have challenges. Mm-hmm. All the humans have challenges. So I would see a therapist if I felt like I wasn't functioning at that base level. And a therapist would help diagnose or give you tools to help you get up to that base level so you can live a productive, happy life. And I'm so thankful for good therapists. I'm thankful for my therapist that when I've been struggling, that she's helped me through things. And I think it's so important. And I think a big thing is there's just this stigma about our mental health.
Yeah, that's changing though, isn't it?
I sure hope so.
Yeah, I think it is. I think so. I hope so. You're right. Yeah.
We all go through hard things, whether it's, any of those things I mentioned. We've all got things that are hard to deal with. So that's kind of like, I would call a therapist for those are kind of the main reasons I would work with a therapist. So a life coach, I work with clients that are already functioning at their base level. And I do have several clients that work with a therapist and a coach. So you would see a coach if you were trying to improve a certain area of your life. Mm-hmm. So I work with people on relationships, with self-esteem, with sometimes we are feeling big emotions and we don't know how to handle them. And so I work with people on different emotion, like when they're dealing with emotions. Not a mental illness per se, but it's just like I am always irritated, or I feel like I'm frustrated, or I've just been really angry lately, or so I help people learn
to work through those things,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
'cause it's
And it's
normal to
not,
have
a lot
those.
of times coaching, is related to the profession. And we've had in previous industries, we've had coaches, for our salespeople, and this is a little different. This is a life coach,
Yeah.
which you get into some of the things you talked about, which is very different. And so and I don't want to say your typical client because they range all over the place. But somebody who would say, hey, has a conversation, you'd say, yeah, you'd be a perfect client because, and you can finish that sentence.
Just someone that has a desire to become the next best version of themselves. That it's like things are fine, but I'd really like to improve my life in whatever area that is. So that would be someone that wants to make things a little bit better.
How long have you been doing this for?
I discovered coaching about 4 years ago, and then I got certified in 2021.
There's obviously a process to go through to get certified.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Well, here's the interesting thing. The coaching industry is not a regulated industry. So anyone can say, I'm a life coach. And there are a lot of people that do that. And
But you say you're certified.
yeah.
So that means you did go through.
I did.
Yeah,
I
okay,
went through
yeah.
a program through called the Life Coach School, where they train coaches they've got specific tools to train people so you can confidently go into a situation. And a lot of people will just be like, they share their opinion of what they think you should do. And there are plenty of people that do that, and some people that might be helpful for. But I did not feel comfortable with that. So the type of coaching that I do is called causal coaching, where you focus on what is the main cause of the problem. And we always think that it's the people outside of us. It's our boss, it's our partner, it's our child, it's our job, it's that mother-in-law or whatever. We all think that our problems are because of the things going on outside of us. And as a coach, I help people learn to focus on what's in their control. With those external things, we can't control them. I think we all try. We all try to, if
That's
I
a
would
losing
like
battle. Would you say? Yeah. Okay.
So that as a coach, I help you figure out what is in your control. And so often it is the story that we're telling ourselves about the situation or our thoughts. We can't control what other people do or what's going on around us, but we can control what we think and how we feel and our behavior. So that's what I help people on.
And through topics, and often, a lot of what we talk about here, the effects of substance abuse, addiction, the effect on families, and a lot of this is certainly related to what you do because you help people navigate through loss, through grief, anger, resentment, relationships, and things like that. And I think that is, a lot of people say, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know how to help. And I think you have to deal with a lot of those emotions as well.
And I think that's probably my favorite part of being a coach because no one's ever taught us what to do with our emotions. And so as a coach, that's a big part of the work I do is helping people to recognize like what we do normally with our emotions and some more productive ways of going about that.
And what a lot of families are faced with is one, recognizing there's an issue, and sometimes it's early on. What's wrong with my husband, wife, child? There's some behavior problems. I can't identify it. I have to have this conversation. I have to find out how do you have that hard conversation, and how do you figure out what to do next? And I know people aren't informed or have somebody advising them. They can make wrong decisions or confront something the wrong way or conduct an intervention that doesn't go well. So in this case, when you're talking about how to talk somebody through how to have a difficult conversation and have it productively, and try to minimize the unintended consequences that might arise from that. So I guess I'm thinking at a point when somebody is really uncertain, that might be a good time to reach out and find out from someone like you, like, help. Are you the type of person, and may not need a therapist, back to that, but is this something you could help with on the early stages of somebody who's really conflicted about what to do when they're facing this? Is that? Yeah.
And it's interesting. So as a coach, I deal so much with emotions, and I always say that our emotions are the fuel that we take action with. So if I'm going into a conversation and my emotion that is my fuel for that conversation is fear or anger or resentment or any of those emotions that are highly charged, I'm going to show up a certain way, and it's probably not going to go so well. So that's one of the things I really help my clients work on is what emotion do you want to feel when you go into this important conversation? So if you're having, so if I am feeling defensive, I'm going to go into the conversation.
You're already set.
Yeah.
You're already girded up.
Yeah. I think of Byron Katie. She has a quote, defense is the first act of war. So if I go into a conversation defensive, I'm ready. And that might not be what I'm looking for. I help my clients figure out what is the emotion I'm feeling, and is this, a lot of times we're looking at things after they've happened, like we look at what they did and what they said, and trace that back to, well, the reason I did those things is because I was feeling angry, and the reason I was angry is because this is what I was thinking about my situation.
Based on beautiful. Some premature conclusions or assumptions, right, that may not be correct. I'll have to tell you, and I might sound a little naive about this, because I've never once thought, in all the conversations I've had with people here on this program and privately, and in fact, so many times when people said, we didn't know what to do, we didn't know how to confront the situation, not once did it come up that I wish I had called a coach in advance of this. So now that we're talking, I'm thinking, my goodness, this is a great way to start for people to get things in check, or at least start to say, okay, how do I work through this? Because who would they call? But it's never come up. It has never occurred to me to say, hey, if you're early on and you're trying to recognize and, let's say, I hate the word confront, but if you're trying to have that hard conversation with somebody, prior to that, or trying to figure things out, it's a great idea to call a coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Never thought of that.
And it's fascinating, because so instead of going into a conversation with anger or fear, and these are all emotions that we feel.
Right.
So I help people to learn how to process those emotions, because we're not just saying, turn off that switch. Yeah. I teach my clients how to allow those emotions when they come up, and that we can generate emotions by how we're thinking about our situation. So a much more productive emotion going into a conversation would be curiosity instead of anger. So instead of going in saying, you did this, you are ruining our family, or whatever the situation is, going into it and just asking questions like, here are some of the behaviors that I've seen, and I'm really curious. Can you help me understand what's going on? And the person might say, like, they might be open and share,
or they might deny it. But either way, it might minimize, lessen the effect of the defensive kicking in, like you had talked about earlier. Yeah.
Also, compassion, love. That's a lot. If I'm going into a conversation with love or compassion as my fuel, it's going to look so different than if I go in with anger and defensiveness and fear.
And I think typically people react with the same emotions they're confronted with, right? If you approach me with anger, guess what's coming back at you?
We mirror that.
Right. You do mirror it. And so the love and compassion, curiosity, might evoke a different response.
Yeah.
That's the intent, anyway.
And I think that's the other thing. We can never control another person. We don't know how they're going to respond.
Right.
But if I can go into that conversation I'm the only one that I can control, and I can go into that with, like thinking about what emotion do I want to fuel this conversation, and that's going to help me show up as the person I want to be, regardless of what the other person does. And hopefully, if we go in with, like you said, they mirror our brain is
program.
That's what it does.
It's programmed that way.
Yeah. And also another thing with that is that once I recognize that our brains I call it my brain on default. If you're angry, I'm going to be angry back.
Of course.
And we think like, oh, I just can't help it. That's just what happens. But as a coach, I help people to recognize like your brain wants to do that, but I always say be the boss of your brain. That we think we don't have any control when our brain goes off and feels this emotion, but it's so as a coach, I help people to learn not to mirror emotions and behaviors.
One of the things that comes up too, and I think about this, and it happens at work when we have confrontations, or even in just relationships. Somebody approaches somebody, says something, and it's maybe a little assertive, and then you answer back, and then later on I say, well, what did you expect other than that kind of a response? What in the world did you think would happen? Of course that was going to happen. Why would you expect anything different? So I think in a conversation like that, or back to the word confrontation, if you are faced with that, is anticipating that kind of response and saying, okay, if this is what I get, how do I respond to this? How do I take a deep breath?
Yeah.
Because I have to have some anticipation that if this is going to happen, how do I react to it? And thinking about that in advance instead of just reactively.
Yeah.
And maybe part of the coaching is just being able to anticipate how to avoid those instinctive reactions.
And I think that one of my favorite questions to ask myself and that I work with my clients on is, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up in this situation? And I think that's, like, for me, I love this thought of we can be in a conversation and we can either be a thermometer or a thermostat. And when I'm a thermometer, if you're angry, I can match that temperature and pick up on that temperature. Or I can be the thermostat that
regulates it.
I don't have to go with
just like, let's cool this down a little bit and keep it at a temperate zone.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And that's going to stick with me now.
I love, am I being a thermometer or a thermostat right now?
Right. Yeah, that's going to stick with me. But that's good. That's good. And a lot of what your other work as a parent and a wife, and that keeps you busy. You have children 21, 19, and 13? Wow, that keeps you very busy too. College age kids,
2 in college.
Wow,
lots of fun.
That's a lot. And also, you're involved with the close community in Long Meadow. You want to talk a little bit about that, and then also too how your coaching intertwines with that and what you've seen about. Yeah,
well, so, and I shared this on our last episode.
But it's worth saying again because I really think that's a tremendous organization.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah. So I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I grew up we didn't drink alcohol, we didn't smoke, no drugs, anything like that. That was just never a part of my life. And so then we moved here,
But by not interrupt you, but it wasn't part of your life, but you weren't exposed to it even on the fringes.
No.
So you weren't even, it wasn't even in your realm around you.
I mean, some people, there definitely were people that was their experience, but my experience, it was like I had never been around alcohol.
Not even exposed to it.
Or marijuana or any of, it was just, it had never been a thing. And then when we moved here, it's a very normal thing. And as an adult, it was like I could see, like I could I make friends with everyone, and I just learned like
Mm-hmm.
I learned how to be around alcohol. Just I never it was never a part of what I was doing, but learning to
Yeah.
that was just a normal thing for people.
Yep.
So I had to figure out how did I want to teach my kids, because it served me very well to. I mean, I've never even had a sip of alcohol, so I've never had a DUI. I've never
Yep.
had a hangover. I've never dealt with any of that,
Mm-hmm.
and I would love that for my kids, but that's not really reality because of what's going on around us socially. But so that was I wanted to be a part of this community that was helping people to learn about, like, if you delay using alcohol or drugs, the longer you delay, the less likely you'll have problems with
Yeah.
addiction. And so I just found it fascinating. I wanted to be informed because I wasn't. It was just like abstaining from all of that, and I wanted to be informed, and so I could teach my kids. And my kids, obviously, they get to make their own choices, and that I'm not going to go into their story, but that it's sometimes kids make different choices than we do as parents. So so that was, and I just wanted to be able to protect my kids, and it turned into just a great opportunity to meet other people in the community and to work together with a common goal to keep our kids educated and safe, and just teach them safe if they do choose to consume, that the time and the place, and just to keep them safe.
Mm-hmm. And especially if they're away at college.
Yeah.
Because it's now they're outside of the world that you're present in. And in the close community, it's, again, I'll just say closecommunity.org. And on that website, I remember being so impressed with all the information on the website.
So much great stuff.
Yeah. And so you've got involved with that. Does that precede your coaching?
I think they were kind of about
about the same
time. Yeah.
Okay, but you've had certainly through that more knowledge, like you said, and exposure to what was going around you in the world of substance use.
Yeah.
And what was happening, and how to protect the children, students, and the youth of particularly in Long Meadow.
Yeah.
But beyond that as well. And certainly what you're doing is coaching. Has that affected or impacted your coaching from what you've learned from all of that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and it goes back to I think so often as parents or in our lives, these situations come up that we are concerned about, and it's been nice being able to offer people skills to show up in these times where we're scared or worried or disappointed with what's going on around us.
Yeah, and I have 4 grandchildren.
I thought you were 29. How was that possible?
I started early. My grandchildren, 18, 16, 13, and 4. And so, of course, I was worried about what they're facing in schools and access and peer pressure and all these things. So certainly I think that, and my grandchildren's parents, my son and daughter-in-law, are doing a wonderful, wonderful job as parents, but they can control just so much.
Yeah.
And peer pressure is a pretty powerful thing. And so you do everything you can to do that. And I think when there's that kind of go back to the word curiosity, what's happening, your kids may not be as open as you want them to be. But I think with, and I going back to this because it really made me think about it. It's like this epiphany right now that when you're going through these kinds of, this kind of uncertainty and have questions about how to handle it, a great way to find out more is by seeking out a coach. And it just never occurred to me.
Yeah.
So for parents, or anybody, but you don't have to be a parent because it could be another loved one, a brother, sister, a parent, that you're concerned in how to approach what to do next. Who else would they turn to for that kind of advice?
Yeah.
a coach makes sense. I mean, other than calling a therapist and saying, okay, but that's a whole different realm of emotions as you described earlier. But I think this is something that people could certainly think about, consider, and certainly to learn more. One is to go to your website and find out, because I was obviously we've spoken a lot and everything, so I've gotten to know you. But you really cover a wide realm of topics. Interfaith marriages is a big one for you, because it's something you've experienced yourself.
Yes.
And how to work through that. And maybe saving a marriage that otherwise might have fallen apart.
Yeah.
Maybe going back to you save a relationship that might have fallen apart. And it might be due to interfaith conflicts, but it might be due to substance use, or it might be due to anxiety or grief. How many parents separate or divorce because of grief, and each doesn't know how to do you speak to a lot of people about that?
Grief is definitely grief is a big thing that so I coach. I do general life coaching on any topic, and then, as you mentioned, I do mixed faith relationships as well. Grief is it's just no one ever teaches us what to do with emotions, and this might be a good point to talk about that for a minute.
Sure. Yes. Yeah.
And so we've got these emotions that feel terrible. Grief and anger and fear and all these emotions, they don't feel good. And if you break it down, an emotion is simply a vibration in your body. So if you're feeling anger, it's just this, like a big, powerful
and that's going back to the uncontrollable. We talked about your brain being but that's uncontrollable, isn't it? Or is it?
Well, here's what I want to go with. It feels like, because we've never we get really good at what we practice. So we've been practicing our whole lives with these emotions of what we do.
Yeah.
And also we have this idea that we should be happy all the time. Like if you had a pie chart, that we have this expectation that it should be 100% happiness. And when we're not, think of like your child comes home from school and they're not happy, and you're like, what's wrong? This is a problem. We have this idea that you should be happy all the time. And as the human experience, we have a whole, I think of it like as this big platter of emotions. We've got happy, sad, excited, angry, stressed, proud. There's so many emotions. And I have a textbook that has 4 full pages of emotions, 4 columns. There are so many emotions, and we just focus on happy, sad, stressed. We have a very limited emotional vocabulary. So with this idea that we should be happy all the time, that idea alone causes a tremendous amount of suffering, because it's like, oh, something's wrong. I don't feel happy. I've got to fix this. I've got to do something about it because I should be happy. And that's not true.
It's unrealistic.
It's very unrealistic. Yeah. And we see people on social media or,
And you feel like you have to live up to that.
Yeah. So it's like, well, I see all Mike's posts about his amazing life and his perfect family. Well, you're not sharing your hard days. You're just sharing your highlights.
It's very selective.
Yeah. You get to curate what you put on there. So when I'm looking at my life that's full of bloopers half the time, the hard things, and I look at you and your amazing life, it's just like, so we really, when we compare ourselves to other people, that causes a lot of problems for us because we think they're always happy, but it's not true. So we generally have, there are 4 things that did you have a question for me?
No, okay. I'm very interested.
Okay.
Yes,
this is fast. I love this stuff. There are 4 things 4 ways that we usually handle our emotions when they come up. So the first is to react. So I'm feeling, and let's just go with the emotion of anger. I'm feeling angry, and so if I'm going to react, I'm going to yell, I'm going to scream, I'm going to stomp my feet, I might slam a door, I might say things I normally wouldn't say, or I might stomp off and just give you the cold shoulder. So those are the things that I would do those are some of the things that I would do if I was reacting. And as you said earlier with anger, most of us are pretty good at reacting because we've done it for decades.
Back to the practice.
Yeah, we practiced it. And so it feels automatic.
Yeah.
But so it's fascinating just recognizing as I'm sharing this, I want you to be thinking about what do I do when I'm sharing these things. So like, oh yeah, I do. We all do it. So I don't want you to think like I'm a terrible person.
Yeah.
We all do this. So no judgment here. So we react. Another thing that we do is we resist. And resisting an emotion is fake it till you make it. Just pretending everything's fine. Nothing. In fact, Amy, she makes fun of me because I used to be really good at resisting my emotions, and she would say how it would just show up and my eyebrows wouldn't change. I was like, no, I'm good. Everything's fine. And she's like, Chris, the eyebrows, I can tell.
A little forced? Yeah, right.
So we pretend that nothing's wrong, or we know we're feeling a certain way, but we don't let ourselves feel that. So it's just, and like with anxiety, I'm not anxious. This is not the time to be anxious. So when
something all about you is telling me that, even if you're denying it. But you can't help it.
We can read each other.
Exactly.
And I think of when we're resisting an emotion, it's kind of like we've got the beach ball at the pool where you push the ball down, everything's fine, everything's fine, everything's fine. And what does that beach ball do?
Boom.
Pops up.
Just erupts.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And so we may resist and then we react. Like these behaviors that we do work. Sometimes we have several of them at the same time. So and then the third thing that we do is we avoid, because those emotions feel terrible and we don't want to feel it. So there's a lot of things that I can do so I don't have to feel my emotions. If I'm angry, a lot of times I'll go grab ice cream because it feels better. Because I feel like I can't be angry. I have to be happy. Something's wrong. And ice cream is the solution. And it helps for a few minutes.
It can.
It's delicious.
Okay, yeah.
So for a few minutes, I'm like, okay, I'm not thinking about my problems.
Okay.
Or there's a lot of things we do to avoid. So overeating, or I might get on my phone and scroll social media because it's like, I don't want to deal with this.
It's a distraction.
Yeah, we distract.
It's funny, I was stressed out last night about work and other things, and I said to my wife, I'm going to have some ice cream. Want some? And she said, no. So I had this bowl of ice cream. It was so good. I'm like, oh, that was great. And it was exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
I really didn't care about I needed the distraction.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So it's just we are trying to numb out that anger or whatever that emotion, that loneliness, that whatever that negative emotion is. We don't like that feeling. And ice cream is a great solution for a few minutes. It doesn't... But it doesn't, when that we get a hit of dopamine from it, and it's like, that was good. And then it's like, okay, go have some more ice cream. And then we get into bad habits. It could also be staying busy. That's a big one for me. It's like, I'm upset, and so if I just go clean my house, angry clean, and just try to distract myself, or it may be getting on Amazon. We're really upset about something, and we go fill up our carts.
Yeah, and all of a sudden the next day all these deliveries, and you go, what the heck?
And then you end up in debt.
Right.
So a lot of times we are avoiding feeling an emotion.
And I'll step in here and interrupt you about the obvious here. The other.
You know where I'm going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'll let you take it there, because that's what's glaring, right?
So then, and all of us have things that we do. And some of them are, it could be exercise. It's just like, I can't deal with this, so I'm going to go do this. But then there are other things that you go have a drink.
Yep.
And that feels better. And it does, I don't have experience with this, but from the people I've talked to, it calms you down. You don't feel that emotion as much, or it can also make it a lot worse.
Yeah.
But so alcohol, drugs, pornography, gambling, there's all these things that the reason that people start doing it is they just want to feel better. They want to feel, because there's that idea that we need to be happy all the time. And if I don't feel good, and having a drink is going to make me feel better. And that one drink was so amazing that I'm going to have another one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we get into problems. And it's fascinating because going back to the dopamine,
Mm-hmm.
our brain wants to be happy.
Yeah.
And dopamine is I'm not an expert on neuroscience, but dopamine is, I think of it as like a pump of ketchup. So you go have a hot fudge sundae and your brain is like, that was amazing, and it just starts like squirting out dopamine that makes you feel happy.
Yeah.
And so then next time when you're upset, your brain remembers.
Mm-hmm.
I felt better when I had that hot fudge sundae, so I'm going to go have another one. And when it's drugs and alcohol, it's that same system. Your reward. So then you go and have another drink. You're rewarding your brain, and that's where we get into
and I'm
problems.
guilty of that a million times.
Yeah.
Like as
All of
others
us.
say, I'm just going to go have a beer. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Yeah, that's just, and yeah, that then, of course, then it at some point gets out of control.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it's funny how that identifying some of those in the beginning may
Mm-hmm.
help you intercept that, I guess.
Yeah.
Hopefully. It's easier said. By
Well,
a
and
lot.
that's as
Yeah.
a coach.
Yes.
That's what
Yes.
people will say. I'll say, okay, so tell me what you did
Yeah.
when you were feeling upset.
Yeah.
Not what the other person's doing,
Right,
but
right.
okay, so I sat down, I watched Netflix with ice cream and a bag of Cheetos, and I was yelling at the people in my family, and we'd identify what are the things that you are doing when you're feeling that emotion.
Or on the other extreme, I stormed out of the house and got drunk.
Yes.
Then there's that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then how that's certainly a lot more consequential.
So that's what we look at is what did you do when you were feeling this emotion, and then so those were I taught you three things.
Yeah.
So we resist, we react, and we avoid our emotions, and that all of us are really good at all of those things too. We've all figured out I don't want to feel this, so I'm going to go do this instead.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a coach, I help you identify how you're doing those things and what that looks like for you. And so it's just like, oh, okay, I just grabbed the Costco bag of chocolate chips because I'm kind of irritated. And just recognizing like, oh, okay, I see why I'm doing this. This makes sense. But this isn't, the more I do that, the more my pants don't fit. And it doesn't solve my problem. So it's just helping people to identify, this is what you're doing. Is this what you want to do?
Yeah.
And the fourth thing that you had a question I could
No.
gotta take another sip.
I knew there was a fourth thing, so I wasn't going to interrupt you for that.
This is what
So it is.
This is what
Yeah.
it's such an important part of what I do is helping people learn to allow their emotions. And I'm going to tell you right now, allowing an emotion doesn't feel nearly as good as ice cream or drinking, or because what you learn to do is you learn how to sit with that feeling. I always say feelings are for feeling instead of reacting, avoiding, or resisting. So what it looks like to allow an emotion is, I have an acronym that I love. It's NOW, N-O-W. So the first thing I do, N stands for name it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm feeling an emotion, I just stop and say to myself, I feel angry.
Mm-hmm.
I feel lonely. I feel embarrassed. I feel humiliated. Whatever that, or I feel happy. I feel love.
Okay.
Because no one teaches us how to do this, so it's a skill that you have to learn to do. So I name it. That's the first thing. And even just with naming it, that can be so powerful because we never let ourselves like stop and think about how
Just to
we
recognize
feel.
it.
Yeah.
Even just simple. Yeah.
Validate to
Okay.
yourself.
Mhm.
I feel sad right now, or I'm really
I
angry
feel
about this.
pissed off.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm scared.
Yeah.
I'm worried about this.
Mhm.
So just identifying that is huge. And the second thing, the O in our NOW acronym, is open up to it. And when I am opening up to an emotion, I can't run and grab my ice cream or my alcohol or whatever it is. I just sit down and just take a deep breath, let my hands relax, get my shoulders out of my ears. Sometimes we're just so tense.
Yeah.
So it's just relaxing, putting my feet on the ground, and just taking some good deep breaths, just making space for that emotion, that vibration to be there. And it doesn't feel good. Those other things feel a lot better, and I'm going to just acknowledge that.
Well, the worse the emotion, the worse it would feel. Obviously, the harder it is to do this.
Yeah.
But okay, yeah.
So you open up and just make space in your body for it to be there. And just, wow, I can feel it in my body. And then W stands for watch it. So we have name it, open up to it, and watch it. And what I mean by watch it is if I were to ask you, when you're feeling angry, what does that feel like? A lot of people can't answer that question for me. They've never really spent any time. Could you answer that question?
Well, I could just say I tense up. I feel tight. I feel I can almost feel my blood moving, and I want to lash out at somebody. I need to take it out on someone. And it could be, you never want it to be your dog, but people say that a driver on the road, a person who's walking by you looks at you the wrong way, or certainly the person that caused it. Most of all, that's who you want to take it out on. So I think that's the thing. You just need to lash out at something or someone.
Because we've practiced it.
Yeah.
Because we know, and it does, when we lash out, it does release an energy.
Right.
But then after, it's like, oh, that is not who I wanted to be in that situation. So when I just allow the emotion, I watch what's going on in my body. And what I like to do, I scan my body from my head down to my toes and just pay attention. So you were saying I feel this tightness, my blood feels like it's moving. So I like to really get curious and just pay attention, like, okay, I feel it in my brows furrowed, and I'm tighten my shoulders, my stomach might be going on, and just observe, this is what it feels like to be angry. And I'm not saying anything, I'm not eating anything, I'm not consuming anything, I'm not pretending it's not there. It's just like, and a lot of times I'll say, this is what it feels like to be a human being that's furious. And just like let it be there and watch what's going on. And it's fascinating because when we resist an emotion, what ends up happening is, I think of it as, it's maybe the emotion is about this big, and if I resist it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it pops up, that beach ball. But when I'm allowing an emotion, I've got a big emotion, and if I just breathe through it and let it be there. And the other thing is, we don't want to be thinking about, I'm mad because of you. It's just turn your brain off as much as you can. I know this is hard, but let yourself just go into your body, drop out of your head and go into your body, and let your body do what it's designed to do. And that emotion, if we let it happen, that emotion gets smaller. And then I always say, when emotions are high, intelligence is low. So if I can just let myself be angry without doing anything, I don't have to do anything about it. I just let it be there. And like I said, this takes practice. And this is, as a coach, this is what I'm helping people learn, these skills. So if I can just let that happen, then I can go back after and be like, okay, this is what I want to do. When my intelligence comes back, then that's when I want to
I can rationalize things.
Yes.
I can figure out what to do. Because I was, after you said NOW, name it, open it, and watch. After that is now what? Now what? Okay, now here I am, and I've gotten all this out of me. Now I can approach this more intelligently. And I think that would be the objective here, right? So that's very interesting, and I think but it does take, one, learning really how to work through that, practicing it, because it doesn't just like, oh yeah, I learned that. I heard Chris say that the other day.
All set.
Yeah, I'm good to go. It does take some practice, and it's like, so well, that's really useful, and it can be applied to so much. I mean, you're confronting these in unknown territory, right? When you're in whether it's facing addiction or the suspicion of addiction. And I think that's why I get into the early parts of this. Like, what do we do? What's wrong with my child, and how do I cope with this? This is maybe a way to say, go through that process, step away, and then you say, okay, now what? Now what? Now I can approach this more intelligently. I can have that discussion, the curiosity that you mentioned, and compassion, and maybe have a more productive result here. So through all that, we've said a lot here in a short time.
Lots of good stuff.
There is, and I think there's always more too, and we could talk about this a lot. And if anybody listening, I think this is extremely useful information. And to learn more, certainly you can go to chrisrichcoaching.com. And do you mind if I share your email?
Sure.
Which is easy.
Yeah.
chrisrichcoaching@gmail.com. Chris Rich Coaching. So look that up. And Chris, is there any? I mean, we've gone through. Is there any topics that we didn't get to talk about? I know that's a tough question in the end. I know, because you could say, yeah, I have 10 more things, but there is so much. And again, we could have you on again, because if there's topics, I think this is extremely useful.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come back. I also have my own podcast.
Yes, let's talk about that.
The Mixed Faith Relationship Podcast. And there are definitely times where I am speaking to that. Those are my examples that I use, because I work with people in that realm and general life coaching. But a lot of the examples, it's just plop it into your own life. I've got a lot of friends that listen, and that faith isn't even a part of who they are,
right? And
they have said they found it very helpful. So
say the name of your podcast again.
The Mixed Faith Relationship Podcast, and you can find it on Spotify and Apple.
Most podcast apps.
Yeah. Just teaching these tools of, most of it is just like what we do with our emotions, and just other little tips and tricks. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook at Chris Rich Coaching.
Chris Rich Coaching.
Chris with a CH. Yes, I should mention that. You can.
Yeah.
CHRIS.
CHRIS. Chris Rich Coaching. Well, Chris, it was great having you again. Dived into a lot here today, so appreciate it very much.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me, Mike.
And we'll be talking along the way.
Sounds good.
I got a feeling. All right. Thanks for being a new friend here. And
be my bestie.
Right. Tell Amy to hey.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody else for listening. This was a lot of fun, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.